the government formulated this project along with others of the subsistence programs to both put men to work for hourly wages, part of which would be to pay for their farm. In the beginning that was done with credit hours, but that didn't last very long. So after that they continued to work for the government for the same wages, and the government just paid them, and they in turn paid a rental fee per month for their place. But they went on working. And the beautiful part of it was that many of these men were young family men with no training, and this offered them an opportunity to learn a building trade. They could either learn to be a carpenter or a stonemason or a plumber or an electrician and some other minor fields that they could enter. But also many, over 1,000 men who were not going to be homesteaders, but other men from the county, even surrounding counties, came to work on the project and got paid also. It just kept Crossville and Cumberland County going. It was a tremendous help.
How long did the homesteaders work on their farms before they knew how much they were going to cost?
Actually, 12 years. They had never been told exactly what they would cost. So they really had to put a lot of trust in the government that they would ever be able to pay for. And in turn, that's why some of the people found it really easy to break their commitment with the Homesteads Project, because they were afraid that they never would be able to even be told what the price would be. But the Second World War intervened there, and that took emphasis away from there, and along with that came a lot of other jobs in defense work. And so not only might it have been partly discouragement, but also there was other opportunities for them somewhere else. And they also could see that the government hadn't been able to do the one of the things that it really intended to have done was to bring independent industry in that would provide auxiliary employment for the homesteaders, and they just weren't able to do that. They tried the cannery, and they tried several things. The hosiery mill was the nearest thing to having success, but it couldn't employ all of the families, and a lot of second generation homesteaders. They couldn't employ all of them. So there was a need for work elsewhere when the building period was over, and a lot of men saw the future coming down to the end of the building, and they were wise to take employment at other places. With every new project manager, pretty much came a new set of rules. They had their own idea of what they thought it was all about and how it ought to be run. So it took a little while to transition from one to the other. Some of them were better liked than others. Some of them were a lot easier to get along with than others. It was difficult, made it difficult on some of the families.
Do we have an FBI investigation going on one of our project managers?
the last project manager actually got hired as the project manager about the time that the government started liquidating after the war, and as I understand, that last project manager did not follow the guidelines set up for selling all the possessions of the homestead per se, but of the cooperative and that sort of thing. He had the responsibility of finalizing the sales to the homesteaders, and the government set up rules that said returning war veterans would have first choice at a homestead if there was one available for them. And I understand that he figured out a way, with the help of one or two others, how he could just get young men to sign their names on the dotted line for a homestead house for a few dollars, and then immediately he would turn that back over to the project manager, and then he could sell it to whoever he wanted. Cut out all the requirements that the government had set up for. And I understand he was about to be charged with misuse of federal funds when he very mysteriously died.
And the rumor on his death was?
Well, a second generation lady who was considered a historian for a long time believed thoroughly that his body was not the body that was found. The men he was with said that he went out in the woods in the location where they were and said he was going to eat his lunch. Well, when it came quitting time, I guess, he had not come back to the work site, and they went looking for him. They found a body disfigured by ants, and so it had on the right clothes. So his body was, that body was, she said, put in the back of his station wagon and taken away. It was cremated, and that was accepted as truth. But she found records where he was about to be arrested and charged with misappropriation of federal funds.
What about the little stone head that sits at the end of a driveway down there on 68? What's the story with it?
Well, in those early days, there were a lot of different people with different occupations hired by the government to go and teach various and sundry things. That was done by an artist who was sent here to teach the homestead men and women, the adults, art. There were several young adults who came in those early days and would teach anything, and he made that from, I guess, concrete.
Is it concrete?
I don't know what it is.
Isn't it stone?
It may be stone.
And when the manager would go in the tower and go to the top of the tower to look out over the project in the mornings, what was he looking for?
I bet you he didn't go up there in the mornings But, what was that name of that paper? Anyway, there was a nationally known newspaper had a running story on subsistence homesteading, and it was reported in that the homesteads, Cumberland Homesteads project manager could go up to the top of his tower and observe at what time in the AM his homesteaders first built a fire in their kitchen stove. But I doubt if he ever went up there. Because most of them men built the fires in their stoves before daylight, first of all. They were early risers. They had to be.
So the barn that was used as sort of a mess hall in the early days, before they had actually families here, they let the men come and work until they had some of the barns built, and then they were able to bring a few families in. What was the situation with it?
I don't know. My father-in-law was J.T. Vaden, and he was hired to be the cook at that. And I think he served breakfast really early, and people drove as far away as Monterey. Whole truckloads of people would come to work, and if they didn't, I guess they could also get meals there besides those that were sleeping there, and they just could bring a cot or a bedroll. Some of them, I think, slept on the floor, and I really think there was about 3 barns that the upstairs part of them were used for the men to sleep in.
But they were able to sleep there and get a meal, and then their noon meal and their supper meal. How did they?
They came back there, I guess, for the noon meal, and then they were on their own for supper.
So do you think the men who worked for WPA also got to pick up the meal there too? Or did WPA start as soon as the homesteaders got started, or was there?
I think WPA was already in process working on roads elsewhere, but I do know that they did work on the homestead roads because there was only one bulldozer for all the clearing and everything on the homesteads, so there was no way that one bulldozer could clear 10,000 acres and build all the roads that go across the project.
What about Mr. Stanton? This must have been his dream project. Do you know much about the man himself? You know, what his ideals and his theologies and his...
Well, he was a Quaker, very much back to the land in his thinking. He was a architect who had been employed up in Pennsylvania, where he came from, and of course he went to Norris and worked for TVA, and then was shipped here. But he was just a gentle man with very basic ideals. He loved wood. I understand he was a collector of wood, and I also understand that he took a piece of crab orchard stone to his home place, that after he left here and went back to Pennsylvania, that he took a piece of our stone back with him for his home place.